The station hung in space like a metal flower, its petals stretching across kilometers of emptiness. Inside, representatives from 847 different species waited. Some had scales. Others had fur. A few were just clouds of gas held together by magnetic fields. They all watched the entrance corridor with the same expression, curiosity mixed with amusement. Captain Hyan stepped through the airlock. His uniform was simple, dark blue, with a single silver star on the collar. No weapons at his belt. No guards flanking him. Just a man of average height with black hair starting to gray at the temples. Behind him came 3 others. Nari, young and nervous, carried a data pad. Taiyang walked with the confident stride of someone who understood machines better than people. Sora's eyes darted everywhere, cataloging every alien form with scientific interest. The council chamber was vast. Seats rose in tiers, circling a central platform where speakers stood. Hyan walked to that platform slowly. His footsteps echoed. Somewhere in the upper tiers, something laughed. It sounded like rocks grinding together. Humans, the Vrexel ambassador spoke. His voice came through a translator that made it sound like thunder. The Vrexel stood 9 feet tall, covered in armored plates that had evolved to deflect plasma. You request membership in the Galactic Council? We do, Hyan said. His voice was quiet. Not shy, just controlled. We believe that cooperation between species benefits everyone. More laughter rippled through the chamber. The Korthax representative didn't even look up from whatever device it was manipulating. Its 6 arms moved in patterns too fast for human eyes to follow. The Shamari Hive Queen leaned forward. She was beautiful in an alien way, her crystalline body refracting light into rainbow patterns. When she spoke, thousands of voices overlapped into one. What do you offer the council? What strength do you bring? Hyan glanced at his crew. Nari gave a small nod. We offer knowledge, medical advances, agricultural techniques. We've solved problems related to problems? The Vrexo laughed again. Young species, you've been in space for what? 100 years? We have been traveling the stars for 12,000. What could you possibly teach us? Hyan remained calm. Perhaps nothing. But we're willing to learn. And in learning, we might find ways to help. The council deliberated for 3 hours. Hyan and his crew waited on the platform. No chairs were offered. At one point, Taiyang shifted his weight and whispered to Hyan that this was a dominance display. Hyan nodded slightly. He understood. He just didn't react. Finally, the vote came. Provisional membership. Tier 7. The lowest level that still counted as being part of the council. Hyan bowed slightly and thanked them. As they left, he heard the Vrexel ambassador say to someone else, harmless. Might be useful for translation work or something. That was 200 years ago. In those 2 centuries, humanity spread quietly. They asked the council which systems were unclaimed. They requested permission before settling anywhere. When other species wanted a particular planet, humans simply chose a different one. No arguments. No disputes. Nari, who had been young on that first day, now ran the human embassy on Council Station. She had gray hair now and laugh lines around her eyes. She spent her days mediating disputes between other species. The Vrexel and Korthax had been in a trade disagreement for 40 years. In 6 months of talks, Nari helped them find common ground. Neither side liked the solution much, which meant it was fair. The galaxy began using humans for such work, mediators, translators, the species that could talk to anyone and somehow make both sides feel heard. Minji worked on a Shamari hive world, studying their collective consciousness. The Shamari had granted her access to their most sacred spaces because she asked politely and respected their customs. She learned their language, all 17,000 dialects. She learned to move in harmony with the hive's rhythms. When she published her findings, she shared them freely with anyone interested. Doyun led a research team on a human station orbiting a red dwarf. They studied new propulsion methods, better energy systems, ways to grow food in zero gravity. Every discovery was logged and transmitted to the Galactic database, available to all species. When the Korthax needed help with a medical emergency, Doyun's team worked around the clock to synthesize a cure. They asked for nothing in return. Humanity built libraries, massive stations filled with information from every corner of the galaxy. Any species could access them for free. Human archivists like Sui spent lifetimes cataloging knowledge, making it searchable, preserving it for future generations. They built schools. Taiyang, old now but still sharp, taught engineering to students from 40 different species. He learned how each species thought, how their minds processed problems. He adapted his teaching for each one. His students went on to build ships, stations, and cities across the galaxy. But humanity didn't build battle stations. They didn't establish military outposts on strategic locations. When the Vrexil expanded their territory near human space, humans simply moved their colonies elsewhere. When the Korthax demanded a human research station be relocated because it was too close to their borders, humans complied within a month. The galaxy watched. And the galaxy learned. Quiet meant weak. On Council Station, young representatives from aggressive species began using humans as the example of what not to be. Don't be like the humans, a Vrexil commander told his students. So afraid of conflict, they'll abandon anything rather than fight for it. Hyan heard such things. He was ancient now, nearly 220 years old, thanks to medical advances humans had quietly developed. He still served as Earth's primary ambassador. When younger humans asked him if it bothered him being seen as weak, he smiled. Let them think what they want, he said. But some humans worried. Bora, Hyan's granddaughter, worked in the embassy's security division. It was a small division. Mostly they monitored threats and reported them to the council. They had no warships to command, no armies to deploy. Grandfather, she said one evening, what happens when someone decides to take from us? What happens when asking nicely isn't enough? Hyan looked at her for a long moment. Then we'll handle it. How? We have 40 settled systems. The Vrexil have hundreds. The Korthax have thousands. We're outnumbered by every major power. Numbers aren't everything, Hyan said quietly. Bora wanted to argue, but something in her grandfather's tone stopped her. She'd heard that tone before. It was the same one he used when he knew something important, but wasn't ready to share it. Across human space, life continued peacefully. Farmers grew crops. Scientists researched. Teachers taught. Traders moved goods between systems, always fairly, always honestly. Humanity had become the galaxy's helpful neighbors. The ones you could count on for a favor. The ones who never caused trouble. In the deep dark between star systems, where no one looked because there was nothing to see. Construction continued on projects that had been started 150 years earlier. Automated factories built components. AI systems ran calculations. Human engineers checked progress reports and smiled quietly. On New Pyongyang, a colony world of 6 million humans, Governor Junho stood on his balcony and looked up at the stars. The colony was beautiful. Rolling hills covered in earth plants that had adapted to the local sun. Cities that blended technology with nature. Schools and hospitals and parks. He didn't know that in 3 months, his world would become a target. He didn't know that the choice he would make would change everything. But somewhere, deep in classified files that only a handful of humans could access, there were plans, contingencies, preparations that had been made quietly, patiently. While the galaxy looked elsewhere, The Galactic Council met and made decisions, and humanity nodded and complied. They stayed in their corner of space, peaceful and helpful and quiet, and the galaxy was so certain of what quiet meant that they never thought to ask what else it might mean. They never wondered what humanity was doing in all that silence. They never considered that maybe, just maybe, quiet was a choice, not a limitation. The Vrexel Imperium was old. Older than most species could imagine. They had conquered their first alien world when humans were still learning to make fire. Their empire stretched across 300 star systems, each one taken by force. Held by Strength.War-Commander, Dex studied the holographic display floating above his command table. New Pyongyang, a human colony world sitting directly on the intersection of 3 hyperspace lanes. Strategically valuable. Currently occupied by weak, quiet humans who would certainly run when faced with real power. Send the message, Dex ordered. The communication reached Governor Junho during breakfast. He was eating rice and vegetables, reading reports from the agricultural sector. The harvest had been excellent this year. Then the hologram appeared in front of him, uninvited. Dex's armored face filled Junho's dining room. Human Governor. The Vrexel Imperium claims this system. You have 10 solar rotations to evacuate. After that, any humans remaining will be removed by force. This is not negotiable. The hologram disappeared. Junho sat very still for a moment. Then he stood, walked to his office, and made a call. The news spread through human space in minutes. Every human colony, every station, every ship received the alert. The Vrexel were taking New Pyongyang. The council had been notified. They expressed deep concern and promised to monitor the situation. In practice, that meant they would watch and do nothing. Galactic news networks began covering the evacuation. Camera drones showed human ships arriving at New Pyongyang, loading civilians. Families carrying what they could. Children crying as they left their homes. Old people taking one last look at houses they built with their own hands. The Shamari, Hive Queen, watched the broadcasts and felt something like sadness. They should fight, she said to her advisors. Even a small resistance would earn them respect. Her advisors agreed. But they also understood why humans didn't fight. Against the Vrexel war fleet, they would lose. And humans seemed to hate losing more than they hated backing down on New Pyongyang. The evacuation proceeded in perfect order. No panic, no chaos. Ships arrived, loaded people, departed. Like a machine operating smoothly. Within 8 solar rotations, 5 million civilians had been transported to other human worlds. Junho requested a meeting with Dex. The war commander agreed, amused. He granted Junho access to his flagship, the Domination, a vessel the size of a city. Junho arrived alone. No guards, no weapons. He carried only a small case containing data tablets. A Vrexel warrior twice his size escorted him through corridors lined with weapons and armor. They passed training rooms where young Vrexel practiced combat. They passed war trophies from a dozen conquered species. Dex received Junho in a strategy room. Maps of human space covered the walls. The war commander sat in a chair designed for his massive frame. He didn't offer Junho a seat. You wanted to talk, Dex said. Talk. Junho opened his case and activated the first data tablet. Holographic charts appeared in the air between them. This system generates significant agricultural output, Junho began. If we work together, we could triple that output. The Vrexel need food for your growing population. We have techniques that we take what we need, Dex interrupted. Junho nodded and switched tablets. Trade routes. If you allow us to remain, we can facilitate commerce between your Imperium and the eastern sectors. We have relationships we don't need relationships. We need territory. For 6 hours, Junho presented data, economic projections, cultural exchange programs, scientific cooperation opportunities. He spoke calmly, thoroughly, making his case for peaceful coexistence with the patience of someone explaining basic mathematics to a child. Dex listened, not because he cared, but because he was curious how long the human would try. It was like watching an insect struggle against inevitable death. Fascinating in a detached way. When Junho finally finished, Dex stood. He walked to the data tablets Junho had carefully arranged on the table. With one armored hand, he crushed them. The devices shattered, pieces scattering across the floor. 5 solar rotations, Dex said. I'm feeling generous. 5 rotations, and then my fleet opens fire on anything still in this system. Dismissed. Junho bowed slightly and left. His escort took him back to his small shuttle. As he departed the domination, every Rexel warrior he passed looked at him with the same expression. Pity for something so weak it couldn't even grasp the concept of strength that the news networks showed Junho's shuttle leaving. Commentators across the galaxy discussed what this meant. The consensus was clear. Humanity had tried diplomacy. It had failed. Now they would retreat, as they always did. On the 4th solar rotation, the evacuation stopped. The civilian ships that had been steadily departing New Pyongyang were gone. The planet's orbital space was empty. Sensors showed the population had dropped to less than 50,000. Dex assumed these were stubborn fools who would die for their homes. He ordered his fleet into position. 300 warships, each one carrying enough firepower to level a city. They entered the system in formation, a display of overwhelming force. That's when Admiral Yeji transmitted her message. Her face appeared on every Rexel ship's communication screen simultaneously. She looked young, maybe 40 by human standards. Her uniform was dark blue, like Hyon's had been 2 centuries ago. Like Junho's had been 4 days ago. Simple, undecorated. This is Admiral Yeji of the Human Defense Fleet, she said. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. You have violated sovereign human territory. Withdraw immediately. On the Domination's bridge, a junior officer laughed. Defense Fleet? Sensors show 40 human ships. We have 300. Dex studied the display. The human ships were small, maybe 1/10 the size of Rexel warships. They hung in space around New Pyongyang, making no aggressive moves. Just sitting there. Ignore the transmission, Dex ordered. All ships, advance. Target their vessels. The Rexel fleet moved forward. Weapons charged. Targeting systems locked on. 300 warships preparing to sweep aside 40. Then space folded dot. It didn't ripple or shimmer. It folded, like paper being creased. And when unfolded, there were 840 human ships where there had been 40. Dex's tactical officer stared at his displays. Commander, How did they? Sensors didn't detect any hyperspace signatures. They didn't jump in. They just appeared. Cloaking technology? Dex suggested. But even as he said it, he knew that wasn't right. Cloaking made you invisible. It didn't make you not exist. Yeji's voice came through again. This is your final warning. Withdraw. Dex's pride wouldn't allow retreat. Not from humans. Not from the species that ran from every fight. All ships, he commanded. Open fire. 300 Rexel warships unleashed plasma torrents that could melt asteroids. The space between them and the human fleet lit up with enough energy to power a small sun. The plasma hit the human ships and passed through them. Not around them. Through them. Like they weren't entirely in the same space. Engineer Hanuel, commanding the human vessel Still Waters, adjusted the dimensional phase of her ship. Her display showed the Rexoplasma existing in normal space, while her ship existed in a layer slightly offset. The two things couldn't interact, like trying to cut water with a sword. "Return fire," Yeji ordered. "Disable only. No kills." Saijun, commanding Patient Stone, had been calculating since the Rexel opened fire. Every ship's position, every trajectory, every weakness in their formation. The computers humanity had quietly developed for 2 centuries processed the data faster than biological minds could comprehend. He fired once, a single projectile. It looked small on the sensors, barely a meter long. It accelerated to 97% of light speed in 3 seconds. At that speed, even a gram of matter carried devastating kinetic energy. The projectile didn't hit one ship. It hit 17. It passed through the first ship's engine, precisely placed to destroy the power core without breaching the crew compartments. The explosion sent the ship spinning, which put it exactly where Saijun had calculated it would be to collide with the second ship. That collision created debris that disabled a third ship's weapons, like dominoes falling. Except each domino's fall was calculated 200 moves in advance. Across the battlefield, human ships fired. Not hundreds of shots, dozens, each one placed with mathematical perfection. Each one disabling enemy vessels without killing crews. The Rexel fought back. They were warriors, after all, bred for combat across 12,000 years. But they were fighting an enemy that existed in multiple dimensions at once. That calculated battle outcomes faster than conscious thought. That had spent 2 quiet centuries preparing for exactly this moment. 4 hours later, the battle ended. Not because the Rexel fleet was destroyed, because it was disabled. 300 warships drifted in space, alive but helpless. Their weapons offline, their engines dead, their crews unharmed but shocked. Yeji's transmission reached every ship, including the Domination. "Your crews will be provided with life support until recovery vessels arrive. Your ships will be towed to neutral space and returned to you. And War Commander Dex, this is the only warning the galaxy gets." She paused. Then, in that same calm voice, the evacuation wasn't a retreat. It was us moving our civilians out of the way. We asked you to leave. You chose otherwise. Now you know what quiet really means. The emergency session of the Galactic Council began 3 hours after the battle ended. Representatives flooded into the chamber, some still in sleeping clothes. The Shamari Hive Queen arrived with her entourage, her crystalline form pulsing with agitated colors. The Korthax delegation came armed, which was technically against protocol, but no one objected. Even the gas cloud species that rarely attended physical meetings manifested their forms in the chamber. Everyone wanted answers about what they just witnessed. Vex had been brought to the council station under guard. Not Rexel guard, human guard. 2 young human soldiers stood outside the chamber where he waited. They were polite. They offered him water, but they didn't move when he approached the door, and something in their stillness made it clear that trying to force past them would be a mistake. The council chamber filled. Arguments started before the official session even began. The Vrexel demanded immediate military action against humanity. The Korthax agreed. Smaller species that had always relied on the Council's protection looked terrified. If humanity could do that to the Vrexel, what could they do to anyone? Hyan entered quietly. He was so old now that he moved carefully, but his eyes were sharp. He walked to the speaking platform like he had 200 years ago, alone, unarmed. This time, though, no one laughed. "Members of the council," he began. His voice was still soft, still controlled. "We are here because the Vrexel Imperium attacked sovereign human territory. We defended ourselves. That is our right under galactic law. Law? The Vrexel ambassador shot to his feet. You speak of law? You've been hiding weapons technology for centuries. You've been lying to the council. We never lied, Hyan said. You never asked the right questions. Before the Vrexel could respond, another figure entered the chamber. Scientist Jisoo walked with the confidence of someone who had spent her entire life studying things that would make others uncomfortable. She was small, barely 5 feet tall. She looked fragile. She was the most dangerous person in the room. Jisoo activated the holographic display without asking permission. Data flooded the air above the speaking platform. For the record, she said, I'm going to explain what humanity has been doing for the past 200 years. The first image showed a hospital. Human doctors treating alien patients. Medical technology, Jisoo said. We shared everything we thought the galaxy could handle. Vaccines, surgical techniques, disease treatments. What we didn't share was what we built for ourselves. The image changed. Now it showed the interior of a human medical facility. Equipment that looked nothing like anything in the galactic database. Cellular regeneration, genetic repair, life extension. Governor Junho, who spoke with War Commander Dex 4 days ago, is 183 years old. Admiral Yeji, who commanded the defense fleet, is 97. Our medical technology extends human lifespan by 200% and improves health throughout those years. Murmurs spread through the chamber. The Shamari Hive Queen leaned forward. Why didn't you share this? Because 200 years ago, when we tried to share advanced technology, the council told us we were too young to understand proper development, Jisoo said. Her tone wasn't angry, just factual. So we kept developing, for ourselves, just in case. The display shifted to show AI systems, artificial intelligence. The council banned development of AI above Class 3 because of the machine wars 6,000 years ago. We respected that ban. In public. In private, we built quantum AI networks capable of processing more data in a second than biological minds process in a lifetime. She showed them human ships. Dimensional phase technology. We didn't break physics. We just found parts of physics you haven't discovered yet. Our ships exist slightly outside normal space. Not enough to disappear. Just enough that energy weapons can't touch us. More images. Weapons that calculated trajectories with perfect accuracy. Manufacturing systems that built components at the atomic level. Energy systems that generated power from quantum fluctuations in empty space. For 200 years, Jisoo continued, humanity did what you asked. We stayed quiet. We mediated disputes. We shared what we knew. But we also prepared. Because history teaches that peace is wonderful, but the ability to defend yourself is necessary. She closed the display. We didn't lie. We just didn't volunteer information you never asked for. And we built these things not as weapons, but as tools. Tools become weapons only when someone forces that choice. The chamber erupted. Accusations flew. Demands for humanity to surrender their technology. Threats of sanctions. Through it all, Hyan stood quietly, letting them rage. Finally, Sumin stood. She had been Earth's representative to the Council for 40 years. Quiet, helpful, forgettable Sumin, who organized schedules and took notes and never caused problems. Now she walked to the platform with a datapad in hand. If we're sharing information, she said, you should know about the economic analysis. She displayed trade network maps. Lines connecting systems showing resource flows, manufacturing chains, and distribution networks. Humanity embedded ourselves in galactic commerce very carefully. We provided fair prices, reliable service. No one noticed us becoming essential. The maps highlighted critical points. 80 major trade networks now depend on human logistics. We route 40% of medical supplies. We process 30% of food distribution. We maintain the translation databases that allow instant communication between species. Sumin looked around the chamber. If humanity withdrew from galactic trade, the economic collapse would affect 643 species within a month. Millions would die from supply chain failures alone. The Korthax representative stood. "You're threatening us." "No," Sumin said gently. "I'm telling you reality. We built these connections peacefully, through fair trade, through being helpful. But connection works both ways. You're connected to us as much as we're connected to you." She sat down. The council fell silent, processing what they'd learned. Humanity had been underestimated for 2 centuries. The helpful neighbors, the weak mediators. All that time, they'd been building, learning, preparing. The Shamari Hive Queen spoke, her 1,000 voices blending into one. "What do you want?" It was Hyan who answered. "The same thing we've always wanted. Peace, cooperation, fair treatment. We didn't attack the Vrexel. They attacked us. We defended ourselves proportionally. No Vrexel died in that battle. No ships were destroyed. We disabled them and will return them. And if we demand you surrender this technology?" The Korthax representative asked. "Then we'll politely decline," Hyan said. "And you'll have to decide if you want to force the issue. But before you do, consider this. If we wanted to conquer, we would have done it already. We have the technology. We have the strategic positioning. We have economic leverage. We've had all of it for decades." He paused. "But we didn't use it. Because that's not who we are. We're the species that asks before we settle. That mediates instead of fighting. That shares knowledge freely. The only thing that's changed is now you know we can defend ourselves." The council session lasted for 18 hours. Species debated. Factions formed. The Shamari moved toward alliance with humanity. Several smaller species did the same. Others, like the Korthax, remained hostile, but the galaxy had fundamentally changed. News networks broadcast analyses of the battle. Military strategists studied the recordings, trying to understand technology they couldn't quite grasp. Economists calculated the ripple effects of humanity's economic integration. On human worlds, life continued normally. Farmers farmed. Teachers taught. Scientists researched. But now, everyone knew there was a defense fleet. Ships that existed in folded space, watching. Ready. Bora found her grandfather in his quarters on Council Station. Hyan was looking out at the stars through the viewport. "Did we do the right thing?" she asked. "We did the necessary thing," Hyan said. "For 200 years, we tried peace without strength. The galaxy saw it as weakness. Now they know we have strength. The question is whether we can still have peace. And if they come at us anyway?" Hyan smiled. It was a tired smile, but not a sad one. "Then we remind them, as gently as possible and as firmly as required, that we chose to be quiet. We didn't have to be." In the deep dark between stars, automated factories continued their work. The projects that have been running for 150 years were only half complete. Humanity had shown the galaxy some of their capabilities. Not all. Not even close to all done, because the real lesson they'd learned in 200 years of galactic politics was simple. Always keep something in reserve. Always have one more card to play. Always be quieter than you need to be, so that when you finally speak, everyone listens. The galaxy had learned to equate quiet with weakness. Humanity had taught them. Otherwise, but the lesson wasn't finished yet. 6 months after the new Pyongyang incident, the galaxy remained divided. Some species had accepted humanity's new position. Others were planning, The Korthax Dominion held emergency war councils in their capital system. Their leaders gathered in a chamber carved from a single massive crystal, a trophy from their first conquest 3,000 years ago. General Riven stood before the assembled commanders, his 6 arms gesturing at holographic displays. The Vrexel were arrogant, he said. They attacked with conventional tactics against an enemy they didn't understand. We will not make that mistake. The display showed recordings of the new Pyongyang battle, slowed down and analyzed frame by frame. Korthax military scientists had spent 6 months studying every second. They understood the dimensional phase technology now. At least, they thought they did. We can counter their ships, Riven continued. Quantum disruption fields will force them back into normal space. Once they're vulnerable, we overwhelm them with numbers. We have 2,000 warships. They've shown maybe 1,000. Numbers still matter. One of the elder commanders raised a concern. The economic analysis. If we attack, trade disruption will hurt us for a year, maybe 2, Riven interrupted. Then we'll control human space and their technology. The short-term pain is worth the long-term gain. The vote was unanimous. The Korthax Dominion would strike first, hard and decisively. They would show the galaxy that humanity's display was luck, not skill. On Earth, Inho sat in a command center that didn't officially exist. The room was deep underground, shielded by enough rock and metal to survive a direct nuclear strike. Around him, displays showed every human colony, every ship, every strategic asset across 40 star systems. He wasn't a military man by nature. Before joining the defense forces, Inho had been a teacher. He taught mathematics to children, showing them how numbers could describe the universe. Now he used those same skills to coordinate humanity's defense network. The system chimed. Intelligence reports showed Korthax fleet movements. 2,000 warships mobilizing across 5 staging areas. Projected targets, 5 human colonies simultaneously. Inho studied the data calmly. He'd known this was coming. The Korthax were predictable in their way. They valued strength, honor, direct action. Diplomacy to them was what you did while preparing for war. He opened a communication channel. All defensive units, this is command. Korthax fleet movements detected. Initiate protocol Quiet Thunder. Across human space, systems activated that had been dormant for months. The network humanity had built over 2 centuries came online. Not just ships. Everything. The Korthax struck 3 days later. Their fleets emerged from hyperspace at 5 human colonies simultaneously. They expected resistance. They expected battle. They were prepared for the dimensional phase technology. What they found was Commander Inho. His station, the one humanity had been building in the deep dark for 80 years, activated. It was massive, moon-sized. It had been floating in the void between galaxies, far from any sensors. Slowly growing as automated systems added to it. Now it connected every human ship, every human station, every human settlement into a single network. Faster than light communication, something the galaxy believed impossible, allowed perfect coordination across light years of space. The Korthax fleet appeared at Colony Hanyang. 200 warships, weapons charged, ready to overwhelm the defenders. They activated their quantum disruption fields, expecting human ships to be forced into normal space where they could be destroyed. The human ships flickered. For a moment, they became solid, vulnerable. The Korthax opened fire. Then the human ships weren't there anymore. They hadn't moved. They'd shifted to a different dimensional layer than the disruption fields affected. They adapted, the Korthax. Fleet Commander reported back to General Riven. The disruption fields don't work. Then fight them in normal combat. Riven ordered. The battle became chaos. Human ships attacked from angles that shouldn't exist. They appeared behind Korthak's vessels, fired, and disappeared before return fire arrived. But it wasn't random. Inho coordinated every move from his command center, processing battle data faster than the Korthaks could react. But the real weapon wasn't the ships. It was Yunji. She broadcasted to the Korthaks fleet in their own language. Not just their common tongue, but their sacred battle language, the one they used in religious ceremonies. She spoke of honor, of the warrior's code that had guided Korthak's culture for 5,000 years. Warriors of the Dominion, her voice echoed through every Korthak ship. Your leaders have sent you to attack a peaceful species. Is this honorable? Your sacred texts speak of protecting the weak, not crushing them. Of testing yourself against worthy opponents, not slaughtering those who wish only to be left alone. She quoted from the Korthak's religious texts, lines about the true nature of strength, about the difference between a warrior and a murderer, about honor in battle versus cruelty in conquest. On the Korthak's warship Vengeance, Captain Thorn listened. He was old, a veteran of 100 battles. He'd memorized the sacred texts as a child. He knew every line Yunji quoted. And he knew she was right. Weapons hold, he ordered his crew. Captain? His tactical officer asked, confused. I said hold. Thorn opened a channel to the other ships in his squadron. This isn't a battle. It's a slaughter of people who don't want to fight. Where's the honor in that? Across the Korthak's fleet, similar conversations happened. Not on every ship, but on enough. 40% of the Korthak's vessels simply stopped fighting. Their crews refused orders. Some even moved to protect human colonies from their own fleet. The battle at Colony Hanyang ended in 12 hours. The Korthak ships that continued fighting were disabled, just like the Vrexel had been. But most of the fleet just stopped. They sat in space, weapons cold, while their crews argued about honor and duty. The same pattern repeated at the other 4 colonies. Some Korthaks fought. Most didn't. And those who fought were defeated by technology they couldn't match and coordination they couldn't counter. General Riven watched the battle reports in disbelief. His perfect strike had fallen apart. Not because of superior weapons, though the humans had those. Not because of better tactics, though the humans had that too. But because the humans had understood his species better than he understood them himself. Yunji had spent 40 years studying Korthak's culture. She'd learned their language, their religion, their history. She knew what they valued. And she'd used that knowledge not to manipulate them, but to remind them of who they claimed to be. The war ended in 3 weeks. The Korthaks surrendered unconditionally. Not to superior force, but to the realization that they were fighting a species that had done something no one had managed in 3,000 years. They'd made the Korthaks question themselves. On Council Station, an emergency session convened. This time, no one argued with Hyan when he spoke. They listened. We didn't want this war, he said. But we won't be attacked without defending ourselves. The Korthaks came at us with everything they had. We beat them, not by killing them, but by understanding them. He paused. That's what we've been doing for 200 years. Understanding. Learning. We know every species in this council. Your cultures. Your values. Your fears and hopes. We learned because we wanted to communicate. To cooperate. But knowledge cuts both ways. Sumin displayed new data. We're offering a new framework. Species who join agree to peaceful dispute resolution. To cooperation instead of conquest. To shared development instead of hoarded technology. In return, you gain access to human medical technology, human eye assistance, human knowledge. And if we refuse? The Vrexel ambassador asked quietly. He'd been subdued since New Pyongyang. Then you refuse, Hyan said simply. We won't force anyone. But the species that join will advance. They live longer, develop faster, grow stronger. The species that don't join will fall behind. Not because we'll sabotage you, but because that's how progress works. It was a simple offer. Join us or watch us leave you behind. No threats. No demands. Just reality. The Shamari Hive Queen was the first to agree. Within a week, 73 other species joined. Within a month, 200. The framework grew not through conquest, but through appeal. The Korthax took longer. General Riven was stripped of command. New leaders emerged, ones who'd been part of the fleet that refused to fight. They saw which way the galaxy was moving and made their choice. 6 months after the Korthax War ended, 400 species had joined the new framework. Humanity provided technology carefully, matching each species' ability to handle it. Medical advances came first, then agricultural, then educational systems. The galaxy began to change. Life expectancies increased. Food security improved. Old conflicts faded as species found better ways to resolve disputes. But there were holdouts. Species that clung to old ways. That believed strength meant weapons and territory. Humanity let them be. No pressure. No punishment. Just patience. Bora asked her grandfather if it bothered him that some species still refused. Hyan shook his head. Change takes time. We've learned to be patient. In 100 years, maybe 200, they'll see what they're missing. Or they won't. Either way, we've offered. In the deep dark, the automated factories continued their work. The projects were 90% complete now. Humanity had shown more of. 20 years passed. The Galactic Council met in the same chamber where Hyan had first spoken 400 years ago. But everything else had changed. The seats were fuller now. Representatives from 600 species, all part of the new framework humanity had proposed. The other 247 species maintained their independence. Watching from outside, Ambassador Bora stood on the speaking platform. She was 50 now, experienced in ways her grandfather had been at her age. She wore the same simple uniform, dark blue with a silver star. Some traditions were worth keeping. The medical crisis on Rexel Prime has been contained, she reported. Human medical teams worked with local doctors. The disease has been stopped. Life support technology is being shared to prevent future outbreaks. The Rexel representative stood. He was younger than the ambassador who had laughed at Hyan centuries ago. On behalf of my people, I thank humanity. 20 years ago, we would have faced this crisis alone. Millions would have died. Today, because of cooperation, we saved them all. It was strange, Bora thought, how much had changed. The Rexel had rebuilt their culture. They were still strong, still proud. But they channeled that strength into trade, exploration, and protection of weaker species. They'd become the galaxy's peacekeepers, a role they took seriously. After the session, Bora met with Junho. He was ancient now, over 200 years old. His body was frail despite medical technology, but his mind remained sharp. He'd become one of humanity's chief strategists, the man who'd faced down War Commander Thex and stayed calm. The Korthax exploration fleet found something, Junho said, pulling up a star map. A new species. Pre-space flight, but close to achieving it. The Korthax are asking how to make contact. Bora smiled. 20 years ago, the Korthax would have simply conquered them. Now they asked for advice. Send them the first contact protocols. Remind them to be patient, to listen more than they speak. It was humanity's greatest export, really. Not the technology, though that mattered. Not the military strength, though that existed. But the approach. The philosophy that strength didn't have to be loud. That patience was a form of power. On Earth, in a classroom in New Seoul, Teacher Dayan explained history to students who were themselves from a dozen different species. Human children sat next to young Vrexel. Korthak's adolescents partnered with Shamari offspring for group projects. 400 years ago, Dayan said, humanity entered galactic politics as the weakest species. We had no weapons, no territory, no respect. What we had was willingness to learn, to adapt, to wait. A young Korthak student raised 3 of his arms. Teacher, my grandfather says humans won through deception, that you hid your strength. We built our strength while others weren't paying attention, Dayan corrected gently. That's not deception. That's preparation. Your people have a saying, the wise warrior sharpens his blade before the battle, not during it. We spent 200 years sharpening our blade. We just did it quietly. In the Shamari home system, the Hive Queen met with scientist Jisoo, now elderly herself. They stood in a garden that combined plants from both their worlds, a living symbol of cooperation. I've been thinking about those early days, the Hive Queen said, her voices harmonizing into thoughtfulness. When Hyan first spoke to the council, we thought him weak, naive. He was patient, Jisoo said. There's a difference. Yes, we understand that now. The Hive Queen's crystalline form refracted the sunlight into rainbow patterns. My people have existed for 50,000 years as a collective consciousness. We thought we understood everything. Humanity taught us we've been thinking too small. Jisoo smiled. And you taught us that consciousness could exist in ways we never imagined. That's what cooperation means. Everyone teaches. Everyone learns. On Council Station, Hyan sat in quarters that had been his home for 3 centuries. His body was failing finally. Even human medical technology had limits. He was 423 years old. He'd lived long enough. Bora visited him each evening. The framework vote passed, she told him. Another 40 species joined. That's 640 now. And the holdouts? Hyan asked. His voice was weak, but still calm. Still holding out. The Targathi Coalition insists they don't need our help. The Xenex Empire claims our way is corruption of traditional values. Hyan nodded slowly. Let them be. They'll change or they won't. We can't force it. The council wants to make you an elder speaker, Bora said. It's a new position. The first time they've created it. You'd have a permanent voice in council decisions. No, Hyan said softly. I'm too old. And humanity doesn't need symbolic positions. We have real influence. That's better. He looked out the viewport at the stars. Do you know what I'm proudest of, Bora? Not the technology. Not the victories. But that we changed the galaxy without becoming what we opposed. We could have conquered. We had the power. But we chose not to. We stayed who we are. Bora took her grandfather's hand. You started this 400 years ago. One quiet man asking for cooperation. And the galaxy laughed, Hyan remembered. But we kept asking, kept trying, kept building, until the day they needed us and we were ready. 2 weeks later, Hyan died peacefully in his sleep. The galaxy mourned. Not just humans, but 600 species lowered their flags. The Vrexel held military ceremonies in his honor. The Korthaks composed war songs about the peaceful warrior. The Shamari planted a memorial garden where collective consciousness could remember him forever. His funeral was simple. He'd requested it that way. No grand monuments. No speeches declaring him a hero. Just a gathering of people who'd known him, sharing memories. But the galaxy erected monuments anyway. On Council Station, a statue of Hyan stood in the main plaza. Not battle-ready or aggressive. Just standing calmly, data tablets in hand, like he'd carried that first day. The plaque read simply, "He taught us that quiet was not weakness." 5 years after Hyan's death, the galaxy reached a turning point. 700 species had joined the framework. The economic integration was complete. Medical technology had raised average galactic lifespan by 40%. Educational exchanges meant young beings from across the galaxy learned together, breaking down old prejudices. The Galactic Council voted to restructure itself. No more tiers of membership based on military strength. Instead, representation based on population and contribution. Species that helped others gained influence. Species that hoarded or conquered lost it. Humanity didn't dominate the new council. They didn't want to. They held positions of influence proportional to their size and contribution, nothing more. The Shamari held equal standing. So did the reformed Rexel. Even the Korthax, once proud conquerors, now participated as equals in a system based on cooperation, but not everyone joined. The Targathi coalition, 50 species strong, maintained their isolation. They built bigger weapons, claimed more territory, operated by the old rules while the rest of the galaxy moved on. Ambassador Bora, now elderly herself, addressed the council about the Targathi situation. They've raided 3 trade convoys this month, killed civilians, stolen cargo. They're testing us. Do we respond militarily? The Vrexel representative asked. His people maintained a defense fleet, now working in coordination with human forces. No, Bora said firmly. We respond by being better. We increase patrol routes. We offer the Targathi membership again. We show them there's a better way. And if they refuse? If they attack? This from a Korthax commander. Bora's expression was calm. She'd learned from her grandfather well. Then we defend ourselves proportionally. We disable their ships. We protect our people. But we don't become like them. We don't let their violence change who we are. It was the philosophy Hyan had established 400 years ago. Stay true to your principles. Defend yourself when necessary. But never let conflict corrupt your values. In the deep dark between galaxies, the automated factories completed their final projects. Systems that had been under construction for 300 years finally came online. Defense networks, communication relays, manufacturing capabilities that could produce entire fleets if needed. Humanity had prepared. They were always preparing, because the galaxy had taught them that peace was precious but fragile. That strength enabled peace, but only if strength was tempered with wisdom. Commander Inho, now aged himself, inspected the completed stations from his command center. The network was vast, powerful enough to defend humanity and their allies from any threat, hidden enough that most species didn't know its full extent. Should we tell the council about all of this? His deputy asked. No, Inho said. They know we have defenses. They don't need to know every detail. Let them worry about cooperation and growth. We'll worry about keeping everyone safe. It was the old pattern. Humanity remained quiet about their full capabilities, always holding something in reserve, always one step ahead of what others expected. Not from deception, but from experience. The galaxy had taught them that revealing everything was foolish. On Earth, in the same classroom where Dayan had taught, a new teacher named Sangwa explained current events to students. Today, humanity coordinates defense for 700 species. We help mediate disputes. We share technology. We teach cooperation. A human student asked, what about the species that didn't join? The Targathi and others?